Hi fantasy fiction fans, and welcome to Myth and Magic, a fantasy writer's kit bag. I'm fantasy writer Neil Mack, the author of Moondog and the Reed Leopard, and I want to share my love of folklore, local history and nature mythology with writers and creatives like you on my regular podcasts. It's designed with fellow indie publishers and writers in mind, but all fans of fantasy fiction are very welcome to join in. In my fantasy writer's kit bag, writers, artists and creatives will find lots of ideas and discussion about things such as potions, dark arts, fabulous creatures, folktale studies, nature lore, and the interesting history behind the myth and magic that underpins our understanding of the fictional universe. Fantasy writer's definition. This week, Bohemian. In my family we have a fair few Bohemians. It's not surprising really, because we have a trickle of Romany blood that courses through our veins. But what are Bohemians? Well, Bohemians practice an unconventional lifestyle, often amidst a world of conventional, unimaginative and stodgy, buttoned-down conservatives. Their life, Bohemians' life, revolves around music and art and literary adventures and spiritual pursuits. Bohemians may not actually be wanderers, adventurers or vagabonds in a literal sense, but they keep their eyes open and their hearts too, and they like to open themselves up to what they believe are wider influences. Bohemians have often been associated with the unorthodox or anti-establishment political or social viewpoints. For example, they express themselves through free love and artistic living. And of course, this lifestyle often attracts disapproval from the more conservative areas of society. The term Bohemianism emerged in France in the early 19th century when artists and creators began to concentrate in the low-rent, lower-class Romany neighbourhoods of Paris. The title character in the opera Cædmon, 1876, was said to be Bohemian, and Puccini's opera La Bohème perhaps best sums up the lifestyle that's also portrayed in the 2001 film Moulin Rouge, which is about artists living in the Montmartre district of Paris. Mark Twain, the American author, described himself as a Bohemian. So what is a Bohemian? Well, the Dana Award-winning American author Lauren Stover provided 5 distinct types of Bohemian in her field guide. The first is gypsy. These are the expatriate types. They create their gypsy ideal wherever they go. Then there's the beat. These are drifters, and they're non-materialistic and art-focused. Then there's the zen. These are post-beat, and they focus on spirituality rather than art. Then there's the dandy. They don't have any money, but they try to live as if they have plenty. And finally, there's the nouveau Bohemian. These are rich, but they try to enjoy a poverty-stricken lifestyle. Do you have a plan to include a Bohemian character in your upcoming book? Does she or he have genuine ideas to express? Does she study and emulate nature? Does she empathise with the down at heel? Is her motivation art or love above the acquisition of wealth or money? Is she a bit self-parading, perhaps even narcissistic? If she's all of these things, then she's probably Bohemian, so write yourself a Bohemian character. Locus in quo. Whitby. So, like I've already told you, I've been to Whitby at the weekend. It's a seaside town, a port and a civil parish in the Scarborough borough of North Yorkshire, which is situated up on the northeast coast of Yorkshire at the mouth of the River Esk. So if you can picture England being the form of Britannia, this is probably around her shoulders and towards the nape of her neck. Whitby, which is spelt now W-H-I-T-B-Y, but was once spelt W-I-T-E-B-I, means white settlement in Old Norse. As a place of pilgrimage For writers and authors, it is very important. In fact, I went to Whitby last year for around about the same time. And the reason for this is because it's where Cædmon, Caedmon, who is one of 12 Anglo-Saxon poets identified in medieval sources, not only lived, but also started to write. In fact, his writings are the earliest attested example of Old English poetry. So simply put, this monk, Cædmon, a former cow herder, is the first author to have written in English. So I think it's an important pilgrimage place for all writers and authors and poets, but especially those who write in English. Cædmon's cross, which I took a photograph of last year, so I'll put on the show notes, was erected in his honour in the graveyard of St Mary's Church in Whitby, on the cliff, and you can still see it today overlooking the busy harbour mouth. But anyway, back to the bustling little town of Whitby. It clings to the north-east edge of Britain, close to the dark and majestic North York moors. And it's a fishing port, and it emerged as an important trading post during the Middle Ages, supporting important herring and whaling fleets, for example. In fact, there are several whale bones around the town, if you know where to look. This is where the great explorer and navigator Captain Cook learned his seamanship. In fact, he used to sail collier ships up and down the east coast. You can take a trip to his memorial museum if you visit the town. He once lived in a house with people called John and Henry Walker, and you can still visit that house. Cook encountered, and I prefer to use that word than discovered, he encountered the islands of New Zealand, Tahiti, the Easter Islands and Hawaii. So if you live in Hawaii, he's the first European to have reached that area. And it's probably why the state flag, by the way, is a Union Jack, most commonly associated with Great Britain. Oswig, which is spelled O-S-W-Y, who was the Christian king of Northumbria, founded the first abbey at Whitby, and this was in the year 657, and under the abbess Hilda, who was a princess before she converted into Christianity and learned the traditions of Celtic monasticism. Hilda's monastery was destroyed between 867 and 870 in a series of Viking raids, and the Vikings raided all along this coastline, and eventually they did invade and take the capital, York, or what they called Jorvik. But anyway, Whitby Abbey was abandoned then after the Viking raids for 200 years until the Norman conquest of 1066. And around about then the land was granted to a knight, William de Percy, who in 1078 donated it to form a Benedictine monastery. Whitby Abbey continued as a monastery right up until Henry VIII, who, of course, as you probably know, dissolved the monasteries in 1539. It's now partially in ruins, and I've got a fantastic picture on my site which I took at the weekend, which gives you a clue, gives you an idea of the solemnity, but also the grandeur and Gothic nature of that building. Anyway, from the 16th century onwards, Whitby grew steadily as a town as a result of the success of the alum trade, which is a kind of white mineral, and also as a coal port and fishing port. The town became the third largest shipbuilder in England after London and Newcastle. And HMS Endeavour, which is the ship commanded by Cook on his voyage to Australia and New Zealand, was built in Whitby shipyards. And of course, as I already said, it was a major whaling port. And then later, Whitby developed into a spa town, and this was in the Georgian towns. The town always did have mineral water springs, and these three springs became in demand for their medicinal and tonic qualities during the Georgian period. And in 1839, only about 10 years after the advent of railways, Whitby and Pickering line was created, and it connected Whitby to nearby Pickering and then later to York, and was one of the first railways in the country. This, of course, brought in more visitors, day tourists and weekend and week tourists alike, who enjoyed their time in Whitby. The black semi-precious mineral, known as jet, which is the fossilised remains of the monkey puzzle tree, is found in the cliffs and on the moors around Whitby, and it's been used since Bronze Age times to make attractive beads. The Romans are known to have mined jet in the area, and Queen Victoria favoured Whitby jet as part of her mourning jewellery, mourning M-O-U-R-N-I-N-G, on the death of her beloved husband, the Prince Consort, Prince Albert. And that's why Whitby jet became very fashionable. Now, if you're listening to this podcast and you'd like to have a piece of Whitby jet, I have a little piece attached to a keyring, which I purchased in Whitby, and you can have it if you tweet me, and you'll need to go to my Twitter page, and you'll need to share this podcast, Myth and Magic, and the first person to do that will get the little lump of Whitby jet, the black semi-precious mineral that is found in Whitby. Myth and Magic News. The Witcher is coming to Netflix. Yes, news this week that the Witcher literary saga that was begun in 1986 with a Polish short story devised by Andrzej Sapkowski and has grown into a serial that encompasses 8 books, has now been taken up and will be a Netflix original production. So if you don't know about the Witcher literary saga, you should know that witches are beast hunters who develop supernatural abilities at a young age to battle monsters. The saga, the Witcher Saga, focuses on Geralt of Rivia, also known as the White Wolf, and Ciri, I think it's Ciri, but it might be Ciri, a child of destiny. Ciri, she's formerly a princess of a recently conquered country and a pawn of international politics, becomes a witcher in training. The tales are set on an unnamed continent which was settled by elves from overseas. When the elves arrived, they encountered gnomes and dwarfs. After a period of war between these races, the dwarves retreated to the mountains while the elves settled in plains and forests. But when humans arrived, about 500 years before the events of these stories took place, they kindled a series of wars. The humans were triumphant and they became controlling, while the non-human races, which were defined by the humans as second-class citizens, were confined to live in ghettos within human settlements. Book 1 of the Witcher series, titled The Last Wish, was published in 2007. And Sapkowski created a legible language for the series known as Elder Speech, which he says is based upon Welsh, English, French, Irish, Latin and other languages. So The Witcher is coming to Netflix. A trailer for the 8-episode drama, with the expected release date likely to be mid-December 2019, is expected to be shown at this October's Lucca Comic-Con, Lucca Lucca, in Italy. The Witcher is coming to Netflix. Fantasy Writer's Definition. This week, Bohemian. In my family we have a fair few Bohemians. It's not surprising really, because we have a trickle of Romany blood that courses through our veins. But what are Bohemians? Well, Bohemians practice an unconventional lifestyle, often amidst a world of conventional, unimaginative and stodgy, buttoned-down conservatives. Their life, Bohemians' life, revolves around music and art and literary adventures and spiritual pursuits. Bohemians may not actually be wanderers, adventurers or vagabonds in a literal sense, but they keep their eyes open and their hearts too, and they like to open themselves up to what they believe are wider influences. Bohemians have often been associated with the unorthodox or anti-establishment political or social viewpoints. For example, they express themselves through free love and artistic living. And of course, this lifestyle often attracts disapproval from the more conservative areas of society. The term Bohemianism emerged in France in the early 19th century when artists and creators began to concentrate in the low-rent, lower-class Romany neighbourhoods of Paris. The title character in the opera Cædmon, 1876, was said to be Bohemian, and Puccini's opera La Bohème perhaps best sums up the lifestyle that's also portrayed in the 2001 film Moulin Rouge, which is about artists living in the Montmartre district of Paris. Mark Twain, the American author, described himself as a Bohemian. So what is a Bohemian? Well, the Dana Award-winning American author Lauren Stover provided 5 distinct types of Bohemian in her field guide. The first is Gypsy. These are the expatriate types. They create their gypsy ideal wherever they go. Then there's the Beat. These are drifters, and they're non-materialistic and art-focused. Then there's the Zen. These are post-beat, and they focus on spirituality rather than art. Then there's the Dandy. They don't have any money, but they try to live as if they have plenty. And finally, there's the Nouveau Bohemian. These are rich, but they try to enjoy a poverty-stricken lifestyle. Do you have a plan to include a Bohemian character in your upcoming book? Does she or he have genuine ideas to express? Does she study and emulate nature? Does she empathise with the down at heel? Is her motivation art or love above the acquisition of wealth or money? Is she a bit self-parading, perhaps even narcissistic? If she's all of these things, then she's probably Bohemian, so write yourself a Bohemian character. Fabulous creature of the week. This week a boggart. Sitting halfway between Scarborough and Whitby, on the Robin Hood's Bay, there's a place called the Boggle Hole. But why is it called the Boggle Hole, and what is a boggle? Well, a boggle is the local Yorkshire name for mischievous little people who are thought to live in caves along the coast. The Boggle Hole is actually a natural cave formed by wave action where smugglers used to land their contraband. So perhaps it would be fairly healthy for level-headed local folk to steer clear of the place unless they wanted a cutlass stuck into their ribs. Bogles are also known as Boggarts. Bogles and Boggarts are the same thing. They feature prominently in popular fantasy fiction and in various incarnations. For example, in J.K. Rowling's Harry Potter, they are shapeshifters whose true form is never completely known, because they can change shape to correspond with the worst fears of whosoever lays eyes upon them. Though the Boggart of Longer Head from Yorkshire was said to be a fearsome creature the size of half a calf, with long shaggy hair and eyes like saucers. The Boggart of Longer Head trailed a long chain behind itself which made a noise like baying hounds, whereas the Boggart of Hackensall Hall in Lancashire had the appearance of a huge horse, but could also shapeshift into other guises, and may have been the inspiration for Rowling's monsters. The Mumby Boggart in Lincolnshire was described as a squat, hairy and smelly thing. Boggarts or boggle roaring holes are a group of potholes, and some of these are found on Newby Moss in the Yorkshire Dales. Legend has it that boggart roaring holes are the dwelling places of grotesque flesh-eating boggarts whose angry growls have allegedly been heard reverberating from the depths of the dark caverns. In the Seacroft area of Leeds in West Yorkshire, there's a council estate called Boggart Hill, and there's even a road called Boggart Hill Drive. And there's a Boggart Bridge in Burnley, Lancashire, and tradition has it that whoever crosses the bridge must give a living thing to the boggart who lives there, or forfeit his or her own soul. The Boggart. Wildflower of the week. This week, hops. At this time of the year, the cone-shaped fruits of wild hops can be seen dangling from bines, B-I-N-E-S, along the River Thames near my home in Staines. Now, my town, Staines, was once a very important brewery town, and clearly this is because it had good quantities of hops that lived quite happily here, along with fresh water, and both of these are required, of course, to make good beer. Hops are used primarily as a bittering, flavouring and stability agent in beer. And connoisseurs say that hops impart a floral, fruity and citrus flavour and heady aromas. The first documented use of the strobiles, which are the golden yellow flowers of the hop plant, and the hop plant is named Humulus lupulus, and it's interesting to note that lupulus means small wolf, and perhaps this is because the plant has a habit of hunting out and strangling other wild flowers. In some countries it's known as the willow wolf because it clambers over willow. Anyway, Humulus lupulus has been used in beer making from at least the 9th century, though perhaps before. And although other bittering ingredients have been used, such as dandelion, burdock root, marigold and horehound, hops has always been the most important bittering agent. And hops has an advantage over these others because it has natural antibacterial qualities. It means that beer was far healthier than drinking water, probably from medieval times and probably right through to beyond the Industrial Revolution. Hops are a climbing plant and they're trained to grow up trellises in places known as hop gardens, which is probably a throwback to being grown by monks in cloistered monasteries originally. Harvest for hops comes near the end of summer when the flowers are taken to the hop house, also known as a oast house, O-A-S-T, for drying. In Staines we have several oast houses, they're all unused, but if you go to Kent in England, southern England, you'll see many oast houses, lots of which have been changed into dwelling houses, but some which are still used to dry hops. The annual hop harvest is a labour-intensive activity, and in George Orwell's novel, A Clergyman's Daughter, there is contained a realistic description of London families participating in the annual hop harvest down in Kent. So it's only fair to say that hops is the county flower of Kent in England. Hops. Call out this week. Call out, I'm happy to call out Beth Overmeyer, who says, buy my book so I can afford a sword. Now, if that isn't living the life of a fantasy fiction author, what is? Beth is currently proofreading her latest work before she embarks upon her 2019 NaNoWriMo challenge, like so many of us. Beth's most recent novel, The Goblet's Immortal, is set in a land where magic is feared. And the book is ready for pre-order, and it's due February the 20th next year. And she says whoever pre-orders The Goblet's Immortal will receive a free bookmark, signed bookplate, and a mini replica of the silver sword that makes an appearance throughout the book. You can look for her book and her on Amazon, or you can order the book from a good bookstore near you. And don't forget, if you want me to do a call out for you, and you have a new book that you would want me to discuss, then why not contact me? You can contact me at Twitter, Neilmach, Neilmach, all one word, or you can find me on Facebook at author.neilmach, all one word, or you could also find me at my website, and don't forget to check out my show notes, which are on the website at neilmach, all one word, .me.